Hello everyone and welcome to our session today. I am Shalini Pillai, a partner with KPMG. I manage our business in Bangalore in India, and I also oversee all of the work we do for global capability centers. We're going to refer to them as GCCs for the most part through our session today. GCCs in India have gone through 2 decades of evolution. What started off way back in the 90s to leverage the cost model differences and the benefits that India offered through simple transaction processing has today evolved into a very complex business, one where these centers, where global international players have invested in creating technology talent hubs, are involved in doing some cutting edge work. With layers of innovation and cognitive automation built in, today what the centers are driving are absolutely at the core of business processes and problems that they are solving for the parent organizations. Unleashing the power of what technology has to offer, leveraging the rich talent demographic dividend that India brings to the bear, one is really looking at this commercially leveraged model, truly innovating to drive top line growth, to drive innovation at a very different level. Joining us today, we have some eminent speakers, folks who have actually led global capability centers, innovated and set up these models from scratch. They're absolutely at the core of driving where that future of service delivery is heading towards. We're going to talk about aspects of the operating model and how those have changed over the years. In today's world of Industry 4.0 and digitalization that's being driven across the business value chain, how and what more can these centers deliver for the international players? We're going to talk a little about what the last 8 months of COVID have meant. Has it been a boon or a bane? How have these organizations and the GCCs leveraged the opportunity before them, accelerated the digital technology transformation, and truly delivered business impact? We're going to also touch upon softer aspects of what the workforce of the future means. How prepared are we for that? And last, not the least, we certainly will talk about what are the risks that one needs to watch out for. So stay clued in as we log into this session today and get started taking you through this journey of evolution and what the business impact is going to mean for the world of tomorrow. And with that, let me very quickly introduce my panel members who are going to join me here today. We have Gautam Gulati, who is the head of the IT center for Schlumberger set up in Pune. Gautam has been with the organization for over many years, and today is at the helm of managing 60% of Schlumberger's IT workforce that is working under his stewardship. We're joined by Sudhir Banerjee, who's a senior VP and head of the global business services set up by ABB. Sudhir, in his prior roles, has also worked in establishing shared services for General Electric and Honeywell, and from scratch to taking them to large setups today. He has vast experience in the space of global business operations, process engineering, Six Sigma, and so on and so forth, and you will get to hear a lot from him this evening. We're also joined by Pankaj Srivastava, who heads the engineering team at GE Steam Power, located in Noida. A long timer at General Electric, has actually set up capability centers in India for GE Industrial and several other GE entities. We are joined by Marnix Boersma, who is a partner with KPMG in our Netherlands office, focused on the oil and gas space, bringing years of experience, and will bring in a very interesting perspective from an outside-in standpoint, from a consultant's lens, as well as he's someone who joined KPMG after years at Shell. So someone who's been focused on both upstream and the LNG business across many parts of Shell's business across the world. So like you can see, friends, we have a very eminent panel with vast experience representing various organizations, and we're looking forward to an engaging discussion, especially in today's changing times, which will allow you to have several interesting takeaways and areas to think about and chew upon. With that, I would like to get started, and I'm going to be facilitating this session today. Uh, really kind of getting our panelists to share some of their experiences by talking about a few very specific aspects of what we think you will enjoy listening to. To get us started, I cannot help but talk about what we're seeing in this changing landscape and over the last few months. So I'm going to encourage and request Gautam to share some of his views and bringing all of his experience to bear, looking at how the global organization is looking at the GCC model. How do parent organizations of large setups like this really view this model? And what has changed in that regard, Gautam?
Shalini, first of all, thank you to you and KPMG for having me on this panel. I'm looking forward to this conversation and hearing Pankaj, Sudhir, and Manik share their views. If I can share Schlumberger's situation, right? One, if I look at the overall business situation, the oil and gas industry has been in a transition for the last 2 years. As many of you are aware that it has come under various pressures, supply, price, demand post the pandemic. So clearly, there is a compulsion or an imperative to come up with a much sharper and probably a more agile business model, right? We started Pune 5 years ago, and in 5 years we've been able to ramp it up to pretty much have 60% of the global IT workforce. The Schlumberger has always never looked at the Pune center as a cost arbitrage play. For example, we don't, we all our centers are technology centers, and we have 60 technology centers around the world for supporting various aspects of the business. Now, one of the myths that this pandemic has definitely exploded is the myth of proximity to the business.
Yeah.
Earlier on, to some extent, our growth was kind of, we need to be closer to the business, or we need to be closer to the business. So if you look at the mix of what we had previously, 60% was of the total workforce was. Now I'm talking specifically to do with applications, and that it was about 60% in India and 40 to 45% in business locations. We will by the end of this year we will achieve 85%.
Wow.
Right. So we clearly have had to make structural shifts.
Sure.
Right. And I think the work from anywhere is something which will allow GCCs to actually tap into talent all around the world.
Yeah.
Right. So we are no longer are we going to be limited to just looking at talent in Pune, in Bangalore, in Hyderabad, in wherever we've been used to operating.
Sure.
And therefore, I think the GCCs are very well positioned because they've already, as you rightly mentioned, they've already moved beyond the cost arbitrage place several years ago.
Yeah.
5 to 7 years ago, they became value enablers.
Correct.
Right. So this, with the rush and the need of businesses to accelerate their digital journey, I think the GCCs are extremely well positioned to help their parent companies make this transition and or that pace, achieve that pace quicker.
Sure. Thank you for that, Gautam. Bunch of interesting points. But to me, you're highlighting how you move from 65% and you're on your journey to get to 85% of the global IT workforce says it all in terms of how your parent organization views the model and the benefits thereof. I am going to come back to you in some time, though, on the point around location agnostic model, because what is interesting and what gets asked quite a bit is why offshore? If location doesn't matter, can we not do most of it onshore? So we come back to that because that's an interesting theme. But
Yeah, before you move on, I just say, and I say this to every time we onboard a
yeah,
new person in the company every Wednesday, and I tell them in Schlumberger's vocabulary, the word offshore is a rig in the middle of the sea.
true. Well
we
said.
don't use offshore.
Absolutely. And I forgot for a minute which sector and what panel I'm on. So thank you for that reminder, but a good one to get started. And Sudhir, if I could come to you, I mean, similarly, to get your perspectives in terms of views from the parent organization and what you think have been enablers in this environment. Would love to hear your take on that.
Sure. No, I think broadly, I will just add up what Gautam is referring
Please.
to. So few things are fundamentally getting, the paradigm is getting shifted.
Yeah.
So one is across the organization, you definitely need to work with a layer above, a senior leadership to drive these kind of GCCs, right? Now, one thing which has really happened during this pandemic, that everyone is at home, majority of them, even if they are coming to offices for a limited time.
Yeah.
So this whole change management which comes along with creating a GCC, that you have to explain everyone how a remote team will work with you,
Yeah.
has got properly answered.
Correct.
So that's one big thing. Second, I guess wherever the GCCs are existing, in this environment, they have been the biggest enabler of doing business continuity of resilience.
Yeah.
So as I see ABB, we are serving across my 5 locations, and particularly in Bangalore, more than 89 countries across the world of ABB. And not for a single hour, we had to shut our operations because it was absolutely business as usual. Though we had different mix of work from home and work from office, before that it was a very small, insignificant percentage. If I talk about Bangalore, not more than 2-3% people used to be working from home. Within 2 days after the announcement of lockdown happened, we went 100%. I think that's let's keep that as one big indicator that GCCs are not a general option of cost arbitrage. This is actually a business continuity. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
Second, what is happening and which is adding up to the way many organizations like us are shifting to conventional manufacturing, conventional connect to industry 4.0. There's a generation of huge amount of data which is coming.
Yeah.
And GCC, particularly in this kind of mature organizations, are playing a dual role where on one side, they engage with the subject matter experts who have got very less time, and they use a cloud of resources. And I'm consciously using the word cloud of resources.
Yeah.
To convert that into actionable insights. Now, in this whole pandemic, I think one thing which is really a need is how sharply you communicate across the organization,
Right.
how fast you communicate across the organization, and there is hardly any long-term planning left now.
Yeah.
So if you really look at the fundamentals which are getting answered, or I would say questioned now in this new environment, GCC plays and has a beautiful opportunity to play a much more significant role, what Gautam talked about. We should not even talk about offshoring and cost arbitrage or number of head. I think we should be refrained from talking about headcount as an index.
Yeah.
We should convert that as a contribution per headcount as an index. I think that's where I would say the fundamental things are changing. And one area which I think we have not resolved, but it has to be addressed, the governance which we started and we continued till, I would say, till March, April time frame.
Mm-hmm.
That governance is also getting into a different question now.
Yeah.
Who all should be involved? Who all should be in the decision making? How we can make the organization agile? How we can make it more fact based? How we can make it more spread out?
Yeah.
Because the need is phenomenal. We were talking about in other discussion that during this pandemic, one good thing has happened: the order is not getting killed. Order is getting transformed.
Yeah.
The consumer is still there, but in a new expectation.
Correct.
So whether it is the energy sector, oil and gas sector, or hospitality, or airlines, or retail, or you name any sector, the medical support, everything is going to change.
Correct.
And individual is becoming important. So I would probably close my remarks saying that GCC is no more an aggregation of resources in a building or a location, but GCC I think we should take as an aggregation of a network with which we are going to work. I think with that, those are my initial few points.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So there's some great terminology and concepts you brought in, which we will come back to. I love the cloud of resource model, because quite literally with adoption to the cloud and with resources getting fungible and borders getting blurred, very pertinent. We will also come back on the industry 4.0.
Yeah.
Again, conscious of the forum, others that have said, like one has spoken in a very cliched manner to say, data is viewed as the new oil, but perhaps not viewed as much anymore. But we will talk about leveraging data as well as we go ahead in this discussion.
Sure.
Again, I'd like to move to Pankaj for his opening comments on the whole GCC model. One knows how GE has pioneered the model decades ago, and one has come a long way. But Pankaj, when you look at it and when you see it from an energy sector perspective, would love to hear your thoughts on how is the parent organization viewing this? What has changed over the many years in GE's philosophy, and how you actually leverage this model?
Yeah, so I think sometime before, like almost 2 decades before, when GE started, developing the capability in India as global capability centers for various GE businesses, I think it was very different expectation, and obviously we have gone through a journey. And in today's world, I don't see there is any difference in terms of like what we do in the different locations or different parts of the world in GE and what we do in India. And I think here in terms of taking this journey forward, I think the innovation has kind of mantra for all of us in India, being the engineering R&D setup. How can we be more innovative? And over the years, just to tell you on in the energy and the power sectors, we have thousands of the patents which have been published and which have been filed in all around the world for various gas turbine, wind turbine, steam turbine technologies. So I think there has been a change over the time, and now we see like I think the global technology centers are there in terms of the innovation, in terms of the impact, in terms of adding value. What we expect from the global technology center or global capability centers.
Okay. No, thank you for that, Pankaj. We will touch upon in a little more detail when we get to the whole Industry 4.0 topic and the implications thereof. And to complete our opening sessions, Marnix, from your perspective, you have a unique advantage of having been on both sides of the table and someone who works closely with the sector at large. What do you see as some of the conversations when one looks at what's happening at the headquarter level? What kind of conversations are people getting into, and how is the whole global capability center model perceived? What is changing across wider global service delivery as you see it, Marnix?
Well, thank you. 2020 has not been necessarily kind to the oil and gas sector. And I think that's an understatement. So what you see, and the international oil companies are one of the most visible ones, but cutting jobs is the theme. BP is letting go 15%, Chevron similarly, Shell's at least 10%, and so forth. So if anything, the entire move into GCCs is accelerating, and it gets further supported by means of, say, citizen development, so where people build their own apps, whether that is in Mendix or Microsoft Power Apps or in Appian or in OutSystems. But it's definitely accelerating in this 2020 COVID year. I think, when I was in Shell in 2006, Peter Voser was the CFO at the time, and he said, well, we're going to essentially flip what's now onshore to what is offshore and vice versa in terms of headcount. And sorry, Gautam, for the onshore-offshore terminology. And everybody's, well, private reaction was, yeah, sure, that'll happen. But it really happened. In Shell, most of the finance and the IT and also the business services organization is these days in shared service centers in Bangalore, Chennai, Krakow, Manila. And I think in overall ambition in terms of what is possible as the sector is now refocusing on, say, what does the energy transition mean? Where are the opportunities? How does that mean in terms of contribution to a non-hydrocarbon energy world, or a net zero hydrocarbon energy world? What does it mean? I think it is a model of, say, to what extent transformation is actually possible. If you can do, say, tax compliance for Belgium from Chennai, in French, and the Belgian tax regime is not simple. It's not trivial. I mean, many things are possible, and be that irrespective of location or enforced by further efficiencies. I think it is, aside many, say, tangible things about cost efficiency, skill, etc., also a cultural impetus of doing things a different way, and innovation.
Yeah. Marnik, while you are at the topic, I'm going to ask you to also touch upon briefly, when you look at it, we're going to move to this whole Industry 4.0 concept, where one is talking about core business value chain and processes thereof, not just about the transaction processing, but when you look at the core business value chain, where do you believe energy majors are in terms of the digitalization of the same? And in that context, how do you see the role of these technology hubs that one has set up and invested in?
Well, I mean, traditional industry, big industry, heavy industry is different from more modern technology in the sense that you've got legacy assets. And how much of that are you going to drag into the world of Internet of Things by equipping them with sensors, etc.? You're looking at, say, what is the where is an asset in the life cycle, how many years to go, etc. So what you see is that in newer assets, applications follow first, and there's tremendous potential for improving maintenance, improving uptime, improving reliability. Simply because of better measurement, being able to do things remotely, but also say knowing about parts, with which I mean, so let's say you have an oil field, and at it you've got a compressor increasing the pressure in the field. That compressor comes from manufacturer X, but other companies also buy that part, and you can get data on, say, well, maybe around 6,000 hours this thing starts to get a hiccup, so instead of running into that, you do some preventative maintenance. So there's a zillion applications that are being pursued by the industry, and you get a far more networked ecosystem in an industry that is already extremely networked. I mean, upstream LNG runs in joint ventures. The most of the work is done by contractors of a range of firms, and what you see is a trend towards working towards say an internet protocol for asset management, and that is something that's definitely on the move. And I think we'll be surprised by what the industry looks like in 10 years. I think it will be hard to fathom. I think the progress will be very impressive.
Absolutely. And in fact, thanks for that. I have, I'm not a hardcore sector person myself, but have had the chance to see some of what these digital twins look like and what is
Yes.
getting built out of Bangalore. And it's fascinating how, without having to go all out into the rig, one can monitor and control a bunch of things. So it's a fascinating world, and would love to invite Sudhir, Pankaj and Gautam to also comment on this, because it's so core to your business. Sudhir, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so maybe, I will take. So again, I will go by the fundamentals. What is going on is, one is the cost to serve, right? If you look at all the industry we are talking about, the margin is which one time used to be quite a heavy one, is shrinking. Huh? And then this whole thing of predictable service is a big thing. It can be as simple as a homeowner, that if your dishwasher is not working and it has to be repaired, Do you have a pre-signal? So I think it's all about predictability and reliability, right?
Yeah.
And this whole moment of truth between the engineer and the system has to be, zero error. If suppose these are the 3 or 4 fundamentals on which the 4.0 has to be defined, then the GCC has a fantastic role to play.
Yeah.
So, and again, I'm not getting into the safety security part of it, but I'm just taking you a very live example. We have plants across the world, and you have a simple handheld equipment which even not a senior engineer, a field staff is keeping in his pocket. It is your iPhone or a simple phone.
Yeah.
And when he or she comes across a leakage on the plant or some kind of a heat zone,
Yeah.
and she doesn't know whether there's a problem.
Yeah.
Just click of a button, the data reaches a central control team, which can be from a Kazakhstan oil field, from a
Yeah.
Thai oil field, from an Indian Ocean, all across.
Yeah.
Now think of if that predictability has to be defined before 4.0 kind of a system, someone would have taken a flight to reach to that point and would have not even understood. Now that is a kind of ecosystem we are now setting, and it is not an ABB situation; it's across the world, right?
Yeah.
You will be surprised. Indian Railways, and I am taking it to very near to our heart.
Yeah.
We installed some of the equipments, and one of the setup which is working is that the person who's the attendant of your night train cabin has a equipment where he or she can connect to that information to a central team which manages all these tracks. So I'm just
Sure.
going into a
Yeah.
fundamental that if you look at the moment of truth is no more defined by an engineer.
Yeah.
Moment of truth has been now given to the user group, and there's a subject matter experts who are the costly resources who are doing the real value added analytics.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right?
And there could be better examples to see the shift in where this model started to a completely value driven model today.
One thing I think I'm linking back to Marmix and all our panelists point. I think the world future is much more simpler than the world we were representing 20 years back.
Yeah.
And I think that brings another very important opportunity is to how do we really bring the manufacturing or a physical world and a service industry like GCC, what we have been creating, closer to each other. So
Yeah.
I think that we don't need to make them these two tracks run parallel. Somewhere there is a merger which we can create. And I think that's the important ownership leadership has to bring.
Absolutely. And we're going to touch upon that. But while on the theme of the whole digital transformation, Pankaj would love to hear some of your views on the subject.
Yeah, so what Sudhir said, right? Availability and the reliability of our plant is the most important.
Yeah.
Right? Now to make sure that, there is a continuous production and supply of the electricity. And, conventionally, I'll give you example, conventionally as G Steam Power, we do multi-year agreements where we plan and manage the outages, inspection for our boilers, turbine generators. And this helps us to to give the parts, novel parts to the customers, do all kind of repairs and upgrades, right? And so this has been the traditional model, right? With the now digital twins of the power plant and having the lifing models and then having the already inspection data which is available, we are able to now detect any anomaly, much before, before really there would be any issue, right? So this is helping us to really leveraging the digital technology where we are able to access the data, using that data, predicting it, and ensuring the availability and the reliability of the plant. And this is saving, like, when it comes to the, in terms of savings, this is like, this gives a lot of saving in terms of, if I would say, like, for a typical plant in India, if we do this, it would give like crores of saving, right? Just by doing this simple risk-based inspection instead of just doing the, a normal inspection what we do. So this is just an example.
Sure.
Similar,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, thank you, Pankaj. And clearly, cost is one dimension of it. In terms of the other benefits of predicting some of this before it even hits you, there's immense
Yeah.
value in some of that. So some great points there. And Gautam, to kind of close the loop on that subject, if you could touch upon how you see this transformation, and also help get into the subject of what will it take to sustain such innovation in the GCC environment. Because there's stuff that's happened and there's a lot that's ongoing and a lot more to be done, and not easy to actually sustain innovation.
Yeah.
So if you could touch upon both this whole industry 4.0 driven transformation and sustaining the same, would love to hear your views on that.
So let's just take a little bit, the journey of, in a way, IT, and not
Yeah.
just the GCCs, but across. So first it started with support. Then we went into doing projects and doing complete builds and implementations and rollouts, etc. Right? And what I now see a trend that is clearly, it's kind of supplementing and complementing what Sudhir and Pankaj said, and to some extent Marnix as well, is that now we are moving to more and more of real-time monitoring, right? To what Sudhir said.
Yeah.
Right? For example, we until last year were not doing monitoring. Now we are actually doing monitoring of frac pumps all around the world, right? And as you know, fracturing is a big part of the oil and gas business, and we are doing now monitoring. That's where you start now collecting data, and then you start being able to do all your predictive stuff and all that, right? Now, if you were to look at this and you look at just the growth of data centers in India, right? Why have we suddenly seen in the last 3 years Microsoft putting in more data centers? Just day before yesterday or earlier this week was Reliance Jio wanting to set up data centers, right? Which tells you that they are now seeing very clearly where the industry, GCCs, service integrators, service companies are all headed into providing the real-time facilitation of business decisions. And I think that's where really the industry is moving now. So I think I probably just complimented what everybody's already said.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, to the next part of your question, I think in terms of innovation, I think we need to do a lot more than what we've been doing, very clearly, right? There's been a spurt of startup activity, startups. There's been far more engagement of the GCCs and with the startups. Accelerators. NASCOM has been doing stuff, etc., to facilitate this.
Yeah.
But I think this again needs another, probably a harder push. I think where we really need to go faster is our collaboration with academia.
Yeah.
Right? Applied research, funding research programs, which I think is where today, honestly, something which I want personally trying to pursue, right? In a very small way, looking at partnerships with one of the leading engineering colleges in Pune, because I think that's essential to us being a little bit more innovative than what we've been able to be for business impact. We are innovative when it comes to improving our processes, right? Releasing code faster, automation, test automation. But what about innovation for business impact?
Yeah.
And I think that's really the next frontier, if you ask me. And I can see Sudhir nodding his head and Pankaj as well. So it'd be good to hear their views on this topic. So I'll shut up.
No, but thank you for that, Gautam. So well said, because really, when you say innovation for business impact, which is really that delta level of, as opposed to small incremental changes one is driving, very, very pertinent. And in fact, it brings us to this whole theme of, which has been very much at the heart of it, technology having driven the evolution. But when you look at what is really enabling it, it's the workforce and the workforce of the future. And it's a topic that I'd love for us to spend a little time about. And I'm going to go back to Pankaj to kind of talk a little about, when you look at this workforce, firstly, how ready do you think it is for that future? If you believe there have been some significant changes over the last 8 months, and if we've learned a few things, if this whole work from home or location agnostic model has taught us a few things, what are those? So how ready is our workforce for the future, and what are your views on that, Pankaj?
Yeah, I think we have seen a big change, right? The way we work in the last 8 to 9 months. I think all of us have experienced this. I think there has been a change in the mindset, right? Sometime before, we didn't really believe that, almost 90 to 100% of the workforce or, all of our employees, colleagues can work from home. I think we are learning in this process. I think we all are part of this journey where we believe like there are better ways to collaborate. There has to be a better IT enabled systems to help us. There has to be there has to be overall learning and training for all of our employees. How can they collaborate? Our people leaders, they also have to learn, right? How can they be a virtual people leader where really they won't be meeting their employees? And so I think this is a journey which I believe all the organizations are going through. And this is also helping our employees to, to also, spend more time on the work and the family, and not really spending, time in commuting to the office. I know I have worked in Bangalore where, some of the employees are more than 2 hours just are on road for to commute. So I think it is helping us to be more productive and helping us to be more creative, and then obviously it's a journey. Uh, but I would say as a industry, as a global capability center, GCC, I think this is a learning for all of us, and I think we are going in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, Pankaj. Agree with almost everything you said there. And Sudhir, I'm going to ask you to connect a few dots from the innovation theme that Gautam left at to some of what Pankaj referred to in terms of the changes. And you yourself spoke of we having come to a time where it's not about adding headcount and adding resources. So as you connect innovation to this work from home model, to then looking at our preparedness for the future, how would you think, how prepared is our workforce for tomorrow?
So Shalini, I think I will wait for our other panel members to reflect on this. But my take is, I think our workforce is much more informed. They are more keen to be purposefully engaged.
Yeah.
So if I really look at my days when we started, any assignment for me was good enough, so long as I'm gainfully employed for 8 hours per day or more.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
If I am pushed by my manager for more work hours, I feel that I am being loved by him. This new workforce is so well informed that the role of us as leaders, it's completely, my last few years of experience, and since I have a teenage daughter, she has just completed her master's and now entered into industry, I can relate with her much more. I think the purpose or the need for GCC leaders, and I'm referring to now the leadership layer, is not to push our previous version of the format to the new workforce. I think that's the biggest thing, biggest failure we will carve out. If we say that when I was in GE, when I was in Honeywell, when I was in ABB, when I was this, I used to do this.
Yeah.
I think that doesn't work.
True.
It doesn't work. Yeah. And I think the whole discussion of the leadership now need to change, and I will fully support what Gautam said. Am I doing this work for an outcome which is going to give an impact? If no, then take a pause. So I think this conversation of leadership and the workforce need to be not on the what part of it, but take a pause and just have a how discussion with them, because they are so innovative. If you give them that space, they may falter a little bit, but they will come back to the corrective piece faster. The role of us need to be that we enable them to search the information, and where the experience really comes. I'm going to touch upon another important topic, which I alluded a few minutes back. If you really look at the service industry, to train a resource, whether he or she is in finance, procurement, HR, engineering, is few weeks. We can debate whether it's 6-7 weeks to 18 weeks to 20 weeks, but a good resource becomes workable within 20 weeks. But when you look at the manufacturing sector, since I worked in that sector, I could see it took 6 months for me to understand basics of machine engineering and workshop and welding, and how it takes 6 years. When you can talk parallel to parallel with at least your manager, that at least something. Now that is one of the biggest, I would say, opportunity which GCCs are sitting today, as to how discussion can be made faster, and not by dictating a terms of a previous model, but allowing that innovative discussions to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I will just park this discussion with very simple example. Since now I have never gone to online shopping till March. My credit card had virtually zero, because I love to go to a mall and buy, or go to a local shopping area and buy physically, touching and getting that.
Yeah.
I was pushed to go to online. And without giving the names, I having two different experience. For my mother, I asked for diapers. And since the website did not allow 6 diapers to buy a single time, so I had to give 3 lots of 2 from the same service provider. And these 3 lots of diapers, though it was ordered on the same time, came to me over 3 different days. 2 each, because that's how the booking was done.
Yeah.
Now, there is no system probably. However, the other service provider, the moment you do 5 things together, a 3-wheeler will come with aggregated bunch of items, and it will deliver only one time. Now look at the customer experience. Every day between 8:30 in the morning and 9, I have to dress up, put a mask, go to the main gate, get my diapers.
Yeah.
3 days.
Yeah.
And look at the cost this agency must have spread. They must have spent 3 times the cost of transportation there. No, I think that's where Gautam and Pankaj and Marigan is talking about. I think the new future is to tell our workforce how the entire experience is going to get designed.
Yeah.
Where the
Absolutely.
data is getting created.
Correct.
How the customer will feel it. It can be an engineer in an oil rig. It can be a housewife in a home. But how is that experience getting designed? I think that's the GCC new wave we have to start creating.
Absolutely. And I think the GCCs of tomorrow have absolutely got to pivot around the customer and leverage the data that they have pretty much at their fingertips to actually manage that value chain much better.
And Shalini, I will just stop it here. And I did not leave this discussion. Fortunately, in both the organizations, we have got known people. So I asked, how is your workflow designed?
Yeah.
You'll be very saddened to know the second organization I'm referring, which has sent me 3 bunch of diapers. It's a very SOP driven organization.
Yeah.
The second one is not a SOP driven organization. It is SOP plus the how driven organization. I think that the organization need to be driven by hows rather than this is what it is.
Absolutely. And I'm going to pick on that point of the how versus the what, and add another layer of the why to it. Because if you look at the significance of purpose, to some of the points that Gautam made earlier on, to say if you have to really drive business impact, then you've also got to question the why in a very different way.
Absolutely.
Because that doesn't get questioned often enough. And some of this links me to the whole concept of looking at organization philosophies, because while there are GCCs, it's going to be a seamless plug-in to the global organization, far from the days of, to go back to the term of onshore, offshore. It's really a critical seamless plug-in. But what is that organization philosophy? How is that purpose being defined? And is the why questioned enough? Is the GCC model then really fit for purpose? And I'm going to move to a subject of culture, which is not an easy one, but Marnix, maybe I'm going to point to you to help us and give us your views on you seeing it, like I said, from 2 perspectives. You're working closer to the headquarters. You're seeing, how the philosophy is driven or shaping up there to how it's getting cascaded. How do you think, how are you seeing culture across borders cascade? Is that happening like it ought to? Some quick comments on that, Marnix, because it's connected to workforce, to questioning the why, to running into innovation. How do you see culture as that one common thread?
Quick comments on the topic of cultural osmosis. That's a challenge. Well, personally, so I worked internationally most of my career. In the last 2 years, I've been based in the Netherlands, and I don't feel particularly Dutch in many ways. And I sometimes wonder who hasn't gotten out there. Personally, I think that in Western Europe and also in North America, people just haven't traveled very much, and they aren't quite aware of, say, how Asia has been developing and how power is shifting and how work practices are different. If you look at, on average, I mean, I'm not talking about the tails of the curve, but on average, the drive and the level of effort that you witness in Asia is very difficult, I think, for the West to match. So in terms of culture, with the shifting to GCCs, which have their center of gravity in Asia, you undoubtedly also inject a different type of culture, and in terms of competitiveness too, because Sudhir, Gautam, and Pankaj and me here, we didn't really compete with each other in our earlier years of our career. But for my kids, who are now approaching their teens, and when they get into their 20s, they have a global playing field, and it's very different. So in terms of cultural influences, you want quick comments. I think that's very difficult because it's such a big topic. But when you connect these cultures in ways and also in ways of working that previously weren't connected, you will get evolution.
Got it. And Marnix, I was actually referring to the cascading of culture from what the parent organization wants to define as its DNA to how do you ensure that a model that's so many thousand miles away is aligned in a similar way. But I think you've kind of touched upon some aspects of that cultural piece. And in fact, this work from home model, I know there's been a lot of discussion and debate about in 8 months of us working remotely, where we are onboarding teams and new people in a remote environment, how do you then sustain culture? How do you kind of maintain that DNA that you want? And I can't help but ask Gautam to comment on it, because earlier in the conversation, he was telling us about, he's by the way sitting in his office, and he gets in to kind of welcome his new joiners. So I'm curious, Gautam, how do you think one can really sustain and keep that culture sacrosanct as the organization wants to project it?
Yeah, I think that honestly, the culture aspect is probably the biggest dilemma that organizations face and will face as we go forward into this work from home, getting embedded in our way of working. And I've been on a couple of other task forces across industry task forces where we've been debating this and discussing this issue. And in fact, somebody even went to the extent of saying, even gaming communities have a culture. So why can't you actually develop a kind of an online culture? Now, that came to me as I'm not part of a gaming community, so I can't relate to it, right?
Yeah.
Now, do I need to possibly understand to relate to it? Maybe I do. And I think this is going to, I don't think there's an easy answer to this question, Shalini. I think each company is going to have to evolve. Now, what we've tried to do and what I've tried to do personally is really reach out, right? Reach out to as many of the 1,000+ people that we have. I think in my first 3 months, I probably managed to get pretty much everybody in on a call at least once, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that just connecting and reassuring and being transparent people being asking you what, and you say, I don't know.
Yeah.
Right. People saying, and reassuring them, saying, we are in this together. We are here for you. I think that's. I think we have a challenge, and I don't think it's going to be an easy one to fix. The social capital of being in the office together. Now, we did something recently, was that we had a month long of what we called Family Month.
Yeah.
Okay. And we kept a series of activities going, and we used tools that we could to actually bring the families together. Now, we couldn't do this center wide, but we went into subsets of 40, 50 people at a time, got 40, 50 families together, playing games, I going and talking to and addressing the families, waving out to the kids, and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm hoping all this is ultimately going to bind us together, as much as we were able to do in an office environment. So I think one approach, if you ask me, what we've tried to do is actually bring the families into the office. That kind of.
Yeah, because we've taken the office into the homes, right? So absolutely.
Exactly.
So why not? And I think all of us have been dealing with that. In fact, completely. I think we're all kind of trying different experiments at it. Pankaj, anything you'd like to highlight in terms of how you all are trying to bridge that gap, either from a culture or given this work from home model? Any quick comments there?
Yeah, I think the key is communication, right?
Yeah.
I think the fundamentals remain same, right? I think having the right trust with the team members or with the employee, right? How can we communicate more transparently, more often, and I think some of those things which are required for a great culture and workplace, I think they remain same. The issue is how can we make it happen? So in this, I think the managers and the employees, I think they have to interact more. So what we are doing here in G, we are actually trying to find the ways, how can we have more frequent discussion or connect among the employees. We are trying to do some social events on let's say on Microsoft Teams, where I'll give you an example. Just day before yesterday, I had a coffee time with my staff, where we said, okay, in the evening we will have coffee together, where all of us joined on Microsoft Teams and sipping the coffee. So I think we need to be creative, and we need to find the ways, how can we influence and how can we stay connected with our teams, and use all the ways like you do the WhatsApp, send SMS, call. I think more and more communication will help us, to spread the right message and the culture within the organization. So that's what we are doing. Shalini.
Thank you, Pankaj. And I think we've all innovated. In fact, technology and platforms like this have allowed us to do so much. In fact, I'm going to take the liberty of running almost like a rapid fire as we come to the close of this session. And since we're all, in these windows next to one another, I'm going to, when we look at innovation that each of you are driving and witnessing and experiencing, if we had to picture an industry platform where GCCs could collaborate with one another, could actually learn from one another, bring innovation at another level. And if I had to open this up and ask you all for one idea each on where and why and how can GCCs come together and collaborate, when you look at some of the larger problems and challenges facing the sector, are there any thoughts that you all may have? And whoever wants to go first, just ideas, picture a GCC collaborative model, a platform where you can innovate and bring your experiences for the wider benefit of the sector at large. I'm just curious, and any thoughts there, anyone?
So Shalini, maybe I will pick few thoughts and then we'll add up to as a team together.
Yeah.
So I'm just thinking of that. See, there has to be a need felt.
Yeah.
So we can all get into a room, but unless the need is not supported for a long-term sustenance, will not move. Huh? So one of the need which is really coming up now of late is how do we really rejuvenate the manufacturing sector?
Yeah.
And I'm just building up, maybe it will be a little bit abstract, but that's a good thing. Now, if you look at the GCC model, overall model, it's a very matured model, 20 plus years, like, Pankaj talking about GE started, American Express started,
Yeah.
then we have transformed into different sub models of it, but net, it's a very matured model, whether it's the transition playbook of you or the grooming of resources for that matter, etc. Having said that, I think I have not participated in any discussion where there is an industry hardcore manufacturing sector people in a hall together with a GCC leadership who
Yeah.
are trying to muscle out what are those big failures each of the industry are facing. And let me count what are those failures which I say. I think Gautam talked about, Pankaj talked about, Marnik talked about. The GCC is always starving from the industry knowledge because they are not in the industry, they are remote from the industry. So if I have to understand how a turbine works, either I have to use a kind of
A simulation.
a simulation or
Yeah.
a parallel, or send a person to a location,
Yeah.
right? Similarly, if you look at the whole manufacturing sector, is still not yet manufactured or still not developed for that upstream downstream kind of a process.
Yeah.
They are very much siloed with their work processes, right? Now there is a great opportunity of getting these two things together, right? It can be how do we solve the last mile failures, it can be how do we look at some of these, how do we free up and train our people. I think that's I don't know, I have never come across that as a big discussion point. But somehow we have kept these two sectors or two attempts at two parallel ones, right? So that's one great opportunity.
Sure.
And the
And
second
I
great
thought
opportunity,
please
the
go
second other great opportunity I think GCC, all of us can and catch, is the whole piece of data to actionable insights, which is again probably a subset of that knowledge which we need to bring.
Sure. And I think the first one gives at least us at KPMG a good idea to kind of facilitate perhaps a session like that, which connects the dots and pulls everyone together. In fact, the Enrich Forum is meant to do some of that, but thank you for that. Gautam, Pankaj, Marnix, any other thoughts on that?
I think, what Sudhir said, in addition to that, I think one area which I had alluded to earlier on in an earlier point is that if we really need to make a step change and a leapfrog in our innovation capability, I think if there is one area where GCCs can come together is funding academia.
That's a great point.
Funding academia, and actually, if you think about it, the GCCs, considering the number of people that they employ, have an opportunity to leverage their leverage by almost probably creating alumni networks. Because if you look at a lot of other countries, a lot of funding and endowment funding which has come up, which then facilitates research, a lot of that comes through alumni.
Correct.
Right? There are certain alumni which are very active, but maybe within the GCCs, with the tiers of engineering colleges that we have, is there an idea there? Again, I'm thinking
sure, absolutely. And this was a little bit of blue sky thinking, so thank you.
So that's really where I would go.
Thank you for that. Pankaj, Marnix, any thoughts?
Well, personally, I think GCCs are part of the organizations that are part of, and it's the same question of how do organizations work together. I don't see them as those as disjunct. There's a certain natural flow of rotation, especially in cities like Manila or Chennai, where one GCC employee goes to the next, so you have that. And I think, say, digital twins and digital assets will at some point, I can't exactly see how, but help GCCs be more part of the real world. But at the end of the day, it's just the same question as how companies can work more together. A lot is happening. Traditionally we're always joint ventures, but you see more and more driven by technology, and at a higher pace because things can go so much quicker these days.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm conscious of time. We do need to wrap up. So I'm going to, in a real rapid fire format, and would request for you all to give me your very quick one-line responses. And these are really two last questions. The first one being, given the environment you're working in, if you had one expectation from the government or the regulator, what would that be that would further enable this global capability center ecosystem and the environment you're in? Gautam?
Certainty.
Sorry?
Certainty.
Certainty. Okay. That's truly rapid fire response. Sudhir?
I would say some of the changes we have done to enable work from home.
Yeah.
I'm not sure whether they are going to, kind of stay put or there will be a change. I think that needs to be relooked, definitely.
And you'd like it to stay put?
I would like it to stay put. I think it's a good
It's a great
advantage
move.
of having a dual model. Yeah.
Absolutely. Pankaj?
Yeah, I would say I think the policy making and I think could be more around developing some platforms where GCCs can come on variety of topics, right? I think that would be a big boon and a need of the hour.
Sure, and I think the industry can enable getting that together. Marnix, any thoughts from you?
I think one area where I hope governments will work together and support is, say, global COVID vaccination. I can see many disparities coming up in that, who goes first, etc. But if one thing helps, then it's, a selfless, coordinated approach to get us out of this COVID mess.
Sure, thank you.
Very true.
And coming to my second rapid fire question, because it's got to do, we've spoken so much about technology driving the future and being at the heart of it. We've touched upon how GCCs have proven resilience like never before through 8 months. And yet there is one scary thought with being so driven by technology. What about the risks? And when one looks at the risks element, there was a story about how one power plant at some point shut down because of a cyber attack and on the controls over there. So linked to the theme of risk, if there is one risk that keeps you awake at night from a GCC model perspective, what would that be? And in whichever order you want to go, but a rapid response, please.
Talent for me.
Okay. Sudhir?
Okay, I think for me, it is more to do with how do I sustain that whole culture which we can develop while you are all together versus when there is a dual mix.
Okay.
I think that's a very important component.
Sure. Pankaj?
I feel like, this is the changing time and there would be change of the parent company, right? How quickly we can understand and adapt to that, right? And especially at this point of time, a lot of us are working remotely. How can we ensure the right motivation and well-being of the employees? So I think those are the two things I would say.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Marnix?
Insufficient diversity and inclusion, because this all works to people working, collaborating globally, whereas, from an evolutionary point of view, humans have not been equipped to stimulate or embrace diverse characters. You're on guard for things that look different. So the risk is that people might fall back into that with, you see in politically how that plays out sometimes.
Thank you. And interestingly, from where I'm seeing it, I have all of the engineer and technical heads, but everyone's talking about the workforce of the future in some form or fashion. And it's got to do with the softer aspect of what enables our model. So at one level, it's reassuring because it tells me that technology is well taken care of and one is cognizant and working on addressing those risks appropriately. It is these elements that keeps you awake. But thank you again for those responses. And gentlemen, with that, we're going to bring the session to a wrap. So appreciate your time, your inputs. We've gone over several aspects of this model, each of you bringing in some very rich examples of how you are leveraging the model in technology to really innovate and drive what's absolutely core to your businesses. So for international oil and gas majors, some of what you're doing is fantastic. And we've touched upon the model itself. We've spoken about themes of collaboration, how the remote working environment is changing. We've touched upon a few interesting aspects, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers are going to have a bunch of takeaways. We certainly, if we had to project and look into the crystal ball and look at the model in 2025, I can bet you it's going to look very different. As each of you continues to innovate and drive this future model as it becomes more seamless, the concept of onshore, offshore, even in the oil and gas parlance, not referring to that, but it's soon to disappear. So this has been a fantastic session, a lot of takeaways, learnings for me, and we look forward to working with all of you, building that platform, some of those collaborative models that we spoke about. Thank you yet again for your time, and may your tribe grow in this whole innovation game. Thank you so much.
And
Thank
thanks,
you.
Thank you.
Shalini and KPMG
Thank
for
you so
setting
much.
it up.
Pleasure
Thank you so
joining.
much.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone.